Okay, so welcome to Heartlifting Solutions and our masterclass tonight on the Nurtured Heart approach. So my name is Carolyn McGuire and my partner here, Kristina Coder. We are the co-founders of Heartlifting Solutions, and we are absolutely passionate about introducing you to the Nurtured Heart approach. I'm going to be the one leading tonight's masterclass. Kristina is going to be my tech support tonight. And for me, the Nurtured Heart approach profoundly changed how I supported kids as an educator because of the successes that I saw it created, not just for the kids, but for the educators and for parents. So tonight we have a really interesting mix of people tonight. We have parents, we have educators who are parents, and we have grandparents tonight. So this is our first night of having grandparents, so that's cool. So welcome everyone. So for me, this is like an intergenerational group that has one common purpose, and that is that we are all here to support the kids in our lives. And we want them to be successful in life, in relationships, at home, at school, and in the world. I would say that we're all here for struggling kids, for challenging kids, misbehaving kids, but also for successful kids and well-behaved kids. Like, we are here for them all because we want all kids to be successful. You're also here as parents and educators and grandparents because we also need to feel successful at educating and parenting. It can't just be for the kids. Like, we want to feel good about how we're doing the job that we've come here to do. I know that you all believe connection and relationship is important. You wouldn't have signed up for this masterclass if that wasn't true. So to my educators in the group, you know that in your day-to-day work, you are connected to kids and you do help kids be successful. You also know that no matter how hard you try or how skilled and experienced you are, that there's a really large number of kids in our classrooms right now and our schools that are not succeeding. And that number is growing. To my parents and my grandparents who are here, you know that you love and support the children in your lives, and you have loads of successful connection moments with them. But you also know that there's times that you see behaviors that are causing chaos and disruption, and we're just looking for tools to support with that. So sinking into, before we start tonight, I want you all to sink into the knowing that we're all different makers. We're all difference makers in the lives of these kids and how lucky they are to have all of us. So my name, as I said, is Carolyn McGuire. I'm a retired educator who has taught for 32 years from junior kindergarten to grade 8. And my passion is really for helping kids and teachers and parents be successful. So here's what I saw. About 9 to 10 years ago, I saw in the educational system, we started getting kids who were more intense, more behavioral challenges, increased escalation, aggression, trashing classrooms, flight risks, anxiety, you name it. The intensity was increasing. As a mentor teacher, I started having teachers come to me, and not just brand new teachers, but experienced teachers saying, I can't teach. Like there's so many behaviors I'm having difficulty teaching. I also had parents of my students coming to me who were really struggling with parenting. And it was different than what I had seen before. And some families really in crisis. It was quite obvious to me that we needed more tools. So let's just take a second and go to the chat box and take a minute and just type in behaviors that you are seeing, that you are experiencing, if you're comfortable with that, or that you have seen in other places that you have been. Let's have a look at what some of those behaviors are. Open up the chat box. So we've got explosive anger, kicking, meltdowns, crying, needing to repeat over and over. Withdrawal, that's an interesting one. So sometimes we have behaviors that are explosive outward and sometimes implosive inward. Eloping from classrooms. I love this new term they've come up with, which is eloping. So kids running out of classes, hitting, throwing objects, defiance. Teachers actually being assaulted and hit. Yeah. Okay, so we've got all of these behaviors that we were seeing. And for me, I was like, okay, I've been teaching for a long time, and I'm a really connected classroom teacher. I needed more tools. And I came across the nurtured heart approach. And one thing I loved about it is that I didn't have to rely on theory, that there was a lot of practicality to it. And as soon as I started using the nurtured heart approach, I started to see successes, some small and some big, but they were enough successes that kept me learning more about it and using it more. So in Heart Lifting Solutions, Kristina and I, we really focus on training educators and parents and organizations in the nurtured heart approach, and then coaching them on how to use those tools with the behaviors that they're seeing. It's important for you to know that tonight is not a nurtured heart approach training. A training lasts about 12 hours, and we do it over 6 hours. Sorry, we do it over 12 weeks. So really tonight, it's an introduction. So my intention for you is to introduce you to NHA, get you curious about it. I want to share with you lots of examples of what it looks like in classrooms and homes. And I want you to leave with some really concrete ways to start using NHA with your students, with your own children, and with your grandkids. So first off, you're not going to throw anything out that's strength-based and already works. NHA is a strength-based methodology, and so they can always be used together, anything that's strength-based. What you may find is that you tweak how you use some other things you use, or you may not need them anymore. So this approach was created by Howard Glasser, and it is connection-based, it is inclusive, it is strength-based, and it is restorative. So what is it? It's not a program, it is an approach, and it's a way of connecting with kids in a supercharged way by teaching you as the adult to see success and speak about it, especially during moments of misbehavior and challenges. And that's one piece that I loved about it. A lot of our tools that we get don't help us in the moment of the challenges. I love that NHA shows us how to see what's going right and to see what's going right in the midst of what's going wrong. So it helps us we'll get a new lens of how we see things. We're going to see things different than we did before. And I also love there's a consequence piece to it, which we'll get to at the end. So I want to start with just an example, because I think it's meaningful to see and hear what it sounds like and looks like. So when I first started using NHA, I was in a school that had different levels for the classroom. So there's 3 or 4 stairs to each level. And there's a child in the school. I'm going to use the name Nadia. Any names I use tonight will be fictional names, but the experiences I'm telling you about are all actual true experiences that have happened. So Nadia is on the stairs. I know she's a new student to the school. She doesn't know me. I don't know her. I know that she is refusing to come in off the yard, and she's refusing to go into class. And when people speak to her, she becomes selectively mute, so she won't answer anything. So I'm trying out NHA. I'm going to look to see what's going right. So I see Nadia. She's outside the classroom on the stairs in front of her classroom. And I walk by her, and my brain starts to shift, and my lens of what I see starts to shift to what's going right. So I'm able to say to her, Nadia, I notice how quiet you are outside the classroom. You're not disturbing any of the other classrooms right now. You're very respectful. And it kept going. That's it. Just a quick little connection, telling her something that's truthful. I swing back a few minutes later, come down the stairs again, and I'm like, wow, look at you. You're not touching anyone. People are walking by you, and you're keeping everybody safe. Swung by again a few minutes later. Wow, I see you with 2 feet on the stairs. Like you're not hanging on the railing. You've got 2 feet on the stairs. That's really responsible of you. I need to go into your classroom now to check on something with your teacher. Do you want to come with me? And I put my hand out, and Nadia came right away with me into the classroom. I'm like, okay, that's success. I've seen educators be out in that hall with her for 45 minutes to over an hour trying to get her into the classroom, and I'm able to get her in there in just a few minutes with using just one of the tools of the nurtured heart approach, which was to look to see what was going right. All right, let's do a few examples of what it sounds like to notice what's going right at home and at school. It could sound like something like this. I see you have supplies coming out of your backpack. You're organized. I noticed your shoelaces are tied up. You're keeping everybody safe. You were running across the room, and the moment our eyes made contact, you stopped. That was great problem solving. When I started talking like this to students, I found like I could feel their eyes following me. I could see them thinking, well, like, what's going on? And I describe it like it felt like I was walking around with an ice cream cone and everybody wanted to lick. Like everybody wanted to be noticed for something. And I was able to suddenly see with like a new pair of glasses that I could basically say to every kid that I saw something that I saw going right. All right. I know, Sue, you mentioned you had to have a team. So this is not just for little kids. This is for middle school kids, for teens. It's for your partner. It's for yourself. It's for the person at the grocery store. We can start noticing what people are doing right everywhere. So let me give you a few examples of middle school and teens so you can hear what that sounds like. Teens might be, I see locker doors shutting. You're prepared. I love how you're chatting on the way into class, but it's at a volume that is perfect for indoors. I appreciate that respectfulness. I saw you take your earbuds out when I started talking. You're a great communicator. All right. So yes, middle school kids and teens will look at you like you're weird when you start talking like this. They may even say things like, stop talking like that. Don't say that. Because this group is just not used to being noticed for what they're doing right. In fact, if I were to really go and recognize each of you for doing something right, you'd also start to feel a little uncomfortable. None of us are really used to being like deeply, authentically noticed for what we're doing right. Okay, so grab your pencil and paper. Many of you shared your behavior concern, and I'm going to try and weave them through our examples tonight of what it looks like and sounds like to use NHA. But before we get started on that, on your piece of paper, I want you to pick one behavior that you've experienced with the child that you've come for. And just jot it down. Something they've done or are doing that you find challenging. And that's going to be the example you're going to work with. So I'm going to keep going as you're jotting that down. If you have any questions along the way, you can pop it in the chat box. Kristina's going to look after the chat box for me. I likely won't answer them till the end because you may find the answer to that question as we go along, but Kristina's going to jump in if she thinks it's something we should answer in that moment. And what you're going to do with that example is that as I introduce some tools to you, you're going to see if you can apply it to your example. So you're kind of coaching yourself tonight. All right, first up, NHA is for all kids. It's inclusive. And if you are in a home or a classroom, I want you to make sure you're using with all the kids and not just the challenging child, because everybody deserves to be seen. So many of the tools that we get, especially as classroom teachers, are for the kids who are misbehaving and not meant for everyone. All right, so I want to talk first about intensity and how it is the gift. And I'm going to tell you how I explain it to kids, but I'm going to use it because I think it helps adults to really understand it as well. So everybody is born with a gift. And it's the adult's job to help us learn about your gift and to use it in really empowering ways. So for these kids who are intense, I want them to know that they were born with the superpower called intensity. And all it means is that you feel emotions in a really big way. It's a rare gift, though. And it's so rare that most adults don't really understand it, and they don't know how to help you use it. So here's the problem. When it's not used properly, it can be loud. It can make us feel really sad or worried or angry, and it can even break things. So what happens is that kids and adults start fearing it. And then everybody wants to try and get rid of it. So everybody sees it as something that's bad, that we need to get rid of, that we need to change, that we need to fix. And if you were to sink into that as an adult for yourself, how would it feel if your gift was something everybody wants to get rid of? Depending on the kids, I like to use the fictional character Harry Potter in the Harry Potter series, because Harry had a gift. His gift was the fictional gift of magic. But when Harry didn't know that he had magic, he didn't know he had this gift. And when he didn't know he had it, like all kinds of crazy things happened while he was using his magic. So he broke things. He broke the cage in the zoo of the snake. He hurt Dudley one day. And it wasn't until Harry went to Hogwarts, it was a school for magic, that he learned how to use it. And when he figured out how to use it, he could fly in a broom, he could make treats appear. And so what NHA does is it helps us understand your gift. It helps us to learn how to help you learn how to use your gift so that we can all celebrate that gift and use it in ways that leave you, speaking to the child, feeling successful and compassionate and intelligent and caring and resourceful and mature and wise. So I want you to sit and think about a kid who's been misbehaving a lot. Those are not words that they describe themselves as. Compassionate, intelligent, caring, resourceful, mature, and wise. Like, how rich and juicy is that? I personally believe the world needs more intense kids right now. I think intense kids are what's needed to change our world. We've got a lot in our world that needs healing. And if we can get these kids the tools to help them use this intensity in empowering ways, we're going to see big changes in very positive ways. Okay, in introducing you to the Nurtured Heart approach, I'm going to give you kind of the nuts and bolts of the approach tonight. And I want to start by talking about something that the Nurtured Heart approach calls inner wealth. So if you want to jot that down on your piece of paper, it's a big one. Our inner wealth is our ability to see and understand our strengths as we navigate the relationships in our lives with ourselves, with other people, with the media, with school and work. What inner wealth isn't is self-esteem. So in our Western world, self-esteem is how we fit in compared to other people. It's the comparison thing. For quite a long time, there was this societal belief that kids needed to have a strong sense of self-esteem. So this sense of how they compared to other people. So to accomplish this, society created these really fake realities for kids, telling kids that everybody's a winner, we're all good at this, that our strengths are all equal. And that's just not true. We all have different strengths. We all have them to different degrees. So we saw things like sports games where they didn't count the goals anymore, or everybody gets a medal at the end of the game, whether you won or you lost. It did not take kids long. Kids are not stupid. It did not take kids long to figure out that this was all fake. And it didn't take adults long. Well, I shouldn't say that. It did take adults quite a while to figure out this wasn't the route that we should go, that it's not actually true. And what we ended up creating was more anxiousness, more depressiveness, more I'm not good enough, more I'm not measuring up again with kids. So NHA looks to flip that, and I'm going to use an example of, let's say it's a kindergarten child. They've drawn a picture of a horse and they show their horse to their dad. And the dad looks at the horse and says, wow, that's an amazing drawer. You're like, I've never seen anybody draw like you. I'm going to take this picture to work and I'm going to hang it up on the wall so everybody can see how amazing my kid can draw. Now, some parents actually believed that, for starters, which was a little bit of a problem. But what happens when that child goes to school the next day and the person beside them is drawing a picture of the horse and it's better than theirs? They've got a mane on their horse and their legs look like they're moving. And suddenly that great feeling the kid had the day before, that I'm the most amazing artist in the world, is gone. And you hear kids saying things like, I suck. I'm an idiot. I'm stupid. I can't draw. I can't read. So what NHA does is it says, okay, if we're going to focus on inner wealth, which is our own understanding of our strengths, and our ability to see them and speak about them, what might that example look like? So the child brings the picture of the horse to the mother, and the mother says, oh, I see you drew a picture of a horse. Tell me about it. And the child says, well, I drew a picture of a horse because I love horses, and I hope someday I own a horse, and I'd love to be a jockey. And the mom says, oh, wow, I'm going to take this picture and hang it up at work because it's going to remind me that you love horses. And I noticed that when you did the sky, you mixed blue and red together with your crayon and you got the color purple. That's what artists do. They mix colors together. You're an artist. So you can see, like, the next day when that kid goes to school and they see the picture of the horse that's better than theirs, they can actually just acknowledge the other kid for their drawing of a horse that's better than theirs, but still knowing that their parent has that picture hanging up because they know they love horses and they do mix colors together. That's what artists do. I'm an artist. That's all still true. So it's one thing when we talk to kids about what their strengths are, we're going to be truthful with them. We're not making things up. With some of our most challenging kids, their inner wealth is actually just non-existent. So from a teacher who works in a behavior intervention program, she will say in September, she gets a symphony of kids saying, I'm dumb. You won't like me. Nobody ever does. I can't read. I can't sit still. And so an example she used was saying to a child, I see you in your seat with a pencil in your hand. You're prepared. That's you being studious. And you can see just in that moment, she's begun to plant the seeds of inner wealth, the seeds of this is your strength and this is who you are. So it's obvious now, like, inner wealth building is for all kids. It's for all adults. It's for everybody. I want to give you an example of a teen I was working with, late teens, mature, outgoing young teen. So many awards for academics, for athletics, for leadership. She just stood out in a school as just having it all together. And she said to me one day, no one notices me. Nobody sees me. It was like I had to hold my mouth closed because I wanted to go, like, you've won all the awards, like, you're the top of your class. That's what was going on in my head. You're on the leadership team. How can you think no one sees you? But what she was actually saying to me once I learned the nurtured heart approach was, nobody sees me. They see my awards. They see my marks, but they don't see me. She actually needed her inner wealth built. And that's what I'm discovering about some of these kids who are well behaved and doing well. Like, their inner wealth still isn't strong. So she might need to hear something like, I saw you got 100% on that test. Congratulations, well done. And here comes the inner wealth building. I know how many hours you studied. That's dedication. I saw you skip that party so that you could go to your sport next team event and get in some more studying, that shows time management. Like, you are intelligent, you are studious, you have great time management, you have perseverance. That's a very different belief about yourself than I just won an award. Okay, so on your paper, what do you think the child that you came for tonight, what do you think's in that child's inner wealth right now? What do you think if they were going to say, I am, what might they say? Okay, I'm going to share with you the inner wealth of a little 8-year-old that I worked with, who had kicked in a window, tossed over some desks, was really having a struggle. And I know his inner wealth was, I'm a little shit. I'm a little shit and nobody can control me, and you're not going to control me either. So in the main, we come to NHA to change behavior often, but really it's to build inner wealth. It's the changing of the inner wealth that changes the behavior in the end. Okay, second thing I want to talk to you a bit about is upside down energy. So I am sure, like, for educators, that many of you get frustrated when you're told you need to make more connection with the challenging kids. You're not connected with them enough. And I know, you know, that's not actually true, that most of these kids were really connected with, and you care very deeply about, and you actually spend a lot of time with. In fact, challenging kids often get more connection than the other kids in the room. And, you know, as I said, I was a very like community-based classroom teacher. And one day I took a class list and I just started checking off names as I connected with kids, as I actually like spoke to them. And I was shocked to discover that the kids who didn't get any of my connection time were my most well-behaved kids. They got the least amount of connection time. I will actually have parents say to me that the challenging kid can suck the oxygen out of the home. There's just so much misbehavior that it's like there's no breathing room for the other children if there's multiple children in the home. So here's what Howard Glasser, who created the approach, observed. And he observed that kids who misbehave actually get a lot of adult connection time, but they're getting it at the wrong time. And they're getting connection. So they're getting connection when they're misbehaving. So NHA calls it upside down connection or upside down energy. So if you don't believe that, as educators, I want you to think about what happens when a child trashes a classroom, escalates, or flees from a classroom. That child gets the EA, might get the principal coming, they get people on walkie-talkies, there might be a secure school called, sometimes a parent gets called in. I have seen even situations where the police have been called in for small children because they're so out of control. If you're in a home environment, I want you to think about, you have 2 kids and they're playing in the family room and you're getting dinner ready. And what will cause you to show up into that family room? When they're fighting or arguing, something happens, and then we show up. So we're coming in at a time, we're saying, here we are, we're here for connection, and you're misbehaving. So we want to break that cycle. So what's actually true is that intense kids actually do need more intense connections. But what ends up happening is their need to get that connection gets filled when they're misbehaving, but it leaves them with poor inner wealth. So we want to get our energy going right side up and building inner wealth. Okay, on your piece of paper, I want you to think about that child you came for. In the behavior situation that you listed, can you identify where you might be coming in with upside down connection. So where you might be stepping in when they're actually misbehaving. Okay, I'm going to keep going. If you think of some times where, oh yeah, they are getting a lot of me in that moment. That's true. And it's okay if you're thinking, but what am I supposed to do? Like this behavior is happening. So just hang on, we're going to get there. All right, I'm going to just show you where upside connection, what it looks like. So let's say one of the behaviors that one of the teachers wrote about was kids blurting. So two things likely happen. So a blurter is a kid who is calling out instead of raising their hand and interrupting other people. So two things likely happen in a classroom. Either the kid gets ignored or they get some upside down connection. So it might sound like, you know the rule, no blurting, or you need to give other people a chance to speak. One teacher that I was working with, their consequence was if the kid blurted 3 times, they got sent into the hall and they had to wait for the teacher then to come out to the hall to speak to them. So can you see the upside down? Like, ooh, the more I blurt, then I get that teacher one-on-one. But they get them for misbehaving. So they're not getting like inner wealth building when the teacher goes to the hall. They're getting connection that doesn't feel good. So with the NHA, we want to make a shift to right side up connection. So here's what it might sound like for that blurting kid. So for the teachers in the group, your blurters are some of your most engaged kids in the class, even though their behavior is annoying. So it might sound like, wow, look at you, so enthusiastic. You can't wait to get your ideas out. Thank you for being such an eager participant in my lesson. So that's my right side up connection. So I know you're going to ask, what about the consequences? So it could sound like, wow, look at you being so enthusiastic. You can't wait to get your ideas out. Thanks for being such an eager participant. I will just look for who had their hand up. I might even put my hand up to stop them. And I'm going to call on them first, and then I'll come back to you to hear what your answer is. I see your patience. So my consequence is they don't get away with it. But I'm going to start tossing in some inner wealth building. And then if they've waited, I can really recognize them. Wow, you look at your patience waiting. Okay, so no one is doing any of this upside down connection thing on purpose. Like me, I wasn't even aware of it, and I didn't have any tools to shift it. So there's no blame and shame at this place that we're in. We just need more tools to make that connection happen in a right side up way. So NHA works to right the connection, and it involves 3 parts. We call them stands. Stand 1 is we learn to stop giving energy to the misbehaving. Stand 2, we learn to give lots of energy to what's going right. And stand 3, which is really clear rules and simple right side up consequences. So when I say right side up consequences, I mean consequences that leave a kid feeling successful. Okay, so we're going to look at the 3 stands by examples. So have your piece of paper ready, because I'm going to give you a tool, and then you're going to try using it in your example. So in stand 1, we don't ignore behavior, but we also don't energize it with upside down connection. So we know that if we ignore behavior, a couple of things are going to happen. The kid's going to intensify their behavior, or other kids will start copying it. If we're going to ignore it, then other kids will be like, well, I might as well do that. Nothing happens. So let's look at some examples. And I've tried to use examples that people said were their behavior concerns. So we've got siblings fighting. Upside down might be, stop what you're doing. You stop what you're doing, and immediately you come in with your big lecture. The rule here is no hitting. Look at your brother crying. You've hurt him. Go to your room. So we've come in with an upside down connection piece. Ignoring might look like we don't do anything. We just let the kids go at it, which that's not going to end well either. Okay, so what does right side up look like? What would NHA tell us to do? You're still going to stop the behavior. I might even raise my voice and say, stop. I might get in between the 2 people. And then as soon as it stopped, I'm going to make eye contact. And in that moment that they have stopped, I'm going to start building inner wealth. I didn't even need to tell you the rule. You stopped right away. You're both problem solvers. Or I see you moving away from each other. You're giving each other space. I'm going to start looking as fast as I can for what's going right as soon as I've stopped the behavior, and I'm going to stop the behavior in the most efficient way I can without a lot of connection. I'm not going to talk about hitting. I'm not going to talk about the rules. They already know them. I'm coming in clean. Okay, a classroom example might be you've got a child who has an ADHD designation. They're getting Zippo work done. You've had a 20-minute work period. They've gone to the bathroom. They've sharpened their pencil. They've blown their nose. Nothing done. So upside down might look like I'm going to give them a big lecture. I'm coming in upside down because they've been misbehaving. No more going to the bathroom or sharpening your pencil. You've gotten no work done in this work period. You're going to have to stay in at recess and get done what you haven't finished now. Ignoring would be me not doing anything and the kid gets no work done. And right side up might be, I'm going to look for the moment that something's going right. So it might sound like this. And remember, the kid's done nothing different than before, but I am seeing them in a new way now. I see you coming back from moving your body. Now you're ready to get started. I see you walking towards your chair. I see you sitting in your chair. You got your pencil in your hand, your book in front of you. You've gotten yourself ready to learn. Let me help you get started. It's a completely different interaction that I'm now having. I've done a whole bunch of inner wealth building and I've stopped the behavior. An important part of being able to implement stand one is being aware when we're connecting in that upside down way, and then stopping it, resetting ourselves. Also knowing from this like evolutionary lens that we are actually hardwired to see what's going wrong and to step in to fix it. So this learning to see what's going right is a real, it has to be the creation of a real new neural pathway for ourselves. So your takeaway from challenge one would be to just start noticing when you or others, it's really fun to watch other people give energy to behaviors you don't want to see. And just watch that upside down connection. One of my favorite places is the grocery store. When you watch kids misbehaving in a grocery store, they'll do something and the parent will say, ask them to stop, and then the kid stops and then the parent says nothing. So when you're misbehaving, I'm going to say something. When you're not misbehaving, I'm just going to go about my grocery shopping. So it's kind of neat. You'll be able to see, it'll start being really obvious to you that it's upside down, which is great. That's the first step. Okay, so if our aim is to start shifting connection from upside down to right side up and to build inner wealth, we're going to need some tools to do that. And that's what Stand 2 is all about. So in our training, Stand 2 is like chocked full of tools that we spend several weeks learning about and practicing, and going home and practicing and coming back in the group and practicing. But tonight, I'm just going to give them to you in examples so you can see what they sound like and look like. So Stand 2 is where we learn to energize what is going right, which is super easy when a kid is not misbehaving. It's not so easy when we have high levels of misbehavior and aggression, and that's where NHA really becomes a needed tool. So we, in NHA, call them recognitions, and we start pointing out what's going right in very specific ways, and we attach a character trait to it. That's where we build the inner wealth. So not just noticing the behavior, but what does that show about the child? So I'm going to give some examples of these ways of recognizing, but okay. So first of all, we can start recognizing things or things we don't usually say anything about. There's a lot going on that we tend just not to say anything about. So for my teachers in the group, I see you walking down the hall, you're being safe and polite. We could have lines of children walking by us and we don't say anything until the one child's doing something in line that's wrong, right? I noticed you got in line from recess right away when that bell rang. You're observant and a leader. For our parents, I see you have your backpack on and you're ready for the bus. You're prepared and organized. Because remember, these well-behaved kids, they deserve to have their inner wealth built. I know we've got some, like a grandparent with a 2-year-old, to be able to say, I see you got your shoes on, like you're independent. Even if they don't understand these words, we want to be building this inner wealth. They'll soon figure out that these are juicy words, and they'll learn what they mean. Okay, this is a great example. I was working with two parents. So they have 2 boys who a lot of aggression and physical fighting. And the parents came to the session. They were telling me about watching the boys in the backyard playing. And they were having fun and goofing around. And the parents were drinking their coffee, watching them. And they were making a bet to see when, the first kid was going to hit the other kid and somebody was going to be crying and come to the door. And so we just did a redo. Okay, let's do a redo on that with this new tool that we have of noticing what's going right. When you watch them and they're playing well together, that's when I want you to open the door and call them to the door. Boys, come over here. Hey, I just want you to know that we noticed that you aren't shoving each other, that each of you are smiling, that you were taking turns on the trampoline. Like, you guys are cooperative and team players. Get back out there and keep doing that. We want to be able to come in at a different time than we would have before. You get to still drink your coffee, but in the midst of the coffee, pull them in and give some juicy inner wealth building. Okay, so go back to your page now. Can you pick one place where you could recognize the child that you came here for doing something that they are doing right, that you could put a character trait to? Just pick one. Okay, so with our misbehaving kids, though, they're giving us waves of misbehavior. Like sometimes it's like literally one right after the other. There's hardly any breathing time in between. So it's way harder to catch them doing something right. And research shows us that we need a 1-to-8 ratio for motivation. So 8 positives to each negative. That's a lot to maintain motivation. NHA is the only approach, the only tool I have come across where I can do the 8-to-1. I could do 18-to-1 if I wanted to, because I'm starting to see more and more of what's going right. So one of the tools NHA teaches us is how can we recognize baby steps towards the behavior that we want to see? Instead of the actual thing, we're looking for perfection. We're looking for what's the baby step towards that. Okay, so I have a little guy named Gregory. He's ripped up his pieces of paper, thrown them on the floor, and he's underneath the desk. And I'm supporting this classroom teacher. So the kid's now under the desk. He's not hurting anybody. So she left him. She went to called everybody else to the carpet to do a read aloud, and she started reading the book. So she's got the book up, and she says to Gregory, I see you looking towards the book. You're an engaged learner. We can't wait till you join us. Game changer. That kid's like, that's a little piece of, we're going to bring you back in now. Yes, you've ripped the paper up. Yes, you're underneath the desk. We'll deal with that in a bit. But right now, we're going to get back to inner wealth building as fast as we can. And she did a beautiful job of that. Let's say one sibling hits another and runs off and hides under the couch. So it might sound, a baby step to that might be, the minute your sister ran off, she started looking after you. Or the kid who was hit, I see you keeping your space to yourself now. You're so wise to be close to mom right now. Our focus is on, and I know you're going to say, what about the consequences? We're going to get there. But how do we get those kids back as quickly as we can into the behavior that we want to see and build inner wealth? This was from a behavior class. The teacher said, I see you sitting at the table looking at me. I noticed you ripped up your paper, but you stayed at the table. You're also communicating with me about disrupting the class. That's your self-control. So there's all these little baby things that kid was doing, these little baby steps towards the behavior we wanted to see, even if we're not seeing the full behavior that we want. All right, you've been very patient in sticking with me to consequences. So right now, I want to just keep giving you some clean examples of recognitions. And remember, the aim is always our shift to making our connection right side up and building inner wealth. Okay, so if you go back to your paper, and these next tools, this is the last one I'm going to have you try, because the rest of them you would need more coaching and practice with us to use them. But try this one. Can you identify a baby step towards the behavior that you want to see? So the behavior that you picked, that you wanted to get rid of, is there something that child could be doing that is a baby step towards it? So maybe you want a child to get their shoes on and they're in the mudroom. You could recognize them for being in the mudroom. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next two tools. And again, you're not going to try these ones on your own. You can try them if you want, but it would take a bit more time for you to think about. So this one was a game changer to me, that we can recognize behavior that was happening that's not happening now in a genuine way, with no sarcasm, and actually feeling and believing what we're saying. We can't fake it. Well, we could, but kids are pretty good to pick up on the faking. So I might say something to this. I said to a child the day after an event, I see you not popping the keys off the computer. You're showing respect for tech and ensuring that all of your friends have equipment that works. That is cooperative and respectful. So I just gave that kid a big lecture in a time when they can receive it. And I'm now skill building. I'm telling them how much their friends care about this, how cooperative they are, how respectful they are. Instead of saying, you can't go on the computer today because yesterday you were rough with the computer and nobody gets to use it today, and that was expensive and yada, 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 yada. What are they believing about themselves then? And people will say, well, what if a kid's going to pop the keys off when you say that? If a kid's going to misbehave because I'm recognizing them for something they're doing right, then go ahead, because you're going to misbehave the other way anyway. But I'm going to be committed to building the inner wealth. Over time, I'm not going to get you doing that. And I have to say, I've never had a kid do the behavior if I was really authentically believing what I'm saying. And it might, like, my emotions might be different with it. I might be like, I see you not popping those keys off. Look at me. That is so respectful of you. You are looking after your friends right now. You are cooperative. Do you get how cooperative you are? Like, I might really get juicy with my emotions around really believing that I want them to believe it. For a child at home, I saw you didn't yell at Z when he was clearly making noises to bother you. Do you know how much self-control and patience that shows? Do you get that most adults wouldn't be able to ignore that kind of irritation? You're an incredible leader right now. That's for a kid who at home flipped out the day before because his brother was doing something that was annoying him. Okay, next tool we could use is we can recognize working through tough emotions. So a couple of people had mentioned about kids with anxiety. So when kids are taking anxiety attacks, we often come in as the adults with, especially parents, we come in with a lot of upside down connection because we're really worried, and we're really worried. We're really worried for them. We want it to go away. We can see how hard it is for them. But what we want to shift our lens to is, what are they doing right with this tough emotion that they're feeling? So it could sound like, I see you squeezing your fists and breathing deeply. That's a great strategy. I'm right here. I see you handling this with maturity. Look at that snot coming out of your nose. Like, Your body is looking after you. And the next day I might say something like, you know what, yesterday you had that really tough emotion and you sat with it, and I knew you'd get to the other side of it because you always do. You are resilient. Because I haven't seen an anxiety attack not have a breather space at some point. And that breather space is where we're gonna come in rich for them. I noticed, here's another example. I noticed just now how you left the room and you swore at us. Because a couple of weeks ago, do you remember what you did? That's right. You threw some things at people. Do you see how much self-control you're showing? Do you get that? You are now able to choose a strategy that keeps people safe. So as we start to shift our lens, we can start learning to see what's going right and what's going wrong. All right, the last example I have on this one is, this is a good one for those of you who have older kids. So I have a grade 8 student, and I don't remember the situation around it, but he stormed into the classroom, slammed the door, and on the way out said, "Fuck you, McGuire." So the moment he left the class, I can take a breather, get myself reset, and turn to the class and say, the moment he left, he started looking after us so that we could keep learning. And I know he's on his way to resetting. So with these two stands working together, you can start to play around with how you flip connections from upside down to right side up. If you are a teacher, a great place to start this is recess duty and supervision duty, because in those two places, we are always looking for what's going wrong. So start going out and looking for what's going right. If you're a parent or a grandparent, choose an activity your child loves and is asking you to do. Those are places where we can start talking about what's going right. We know we're going to get a right side up behavior then. So your takeaway from this stand is start talking about what you see going right and adding that character trait to it. That's your inner wealth building. And any behavior you want to eliminate. So whatever you wrote down on that piece of paper as your behavior you want to eliminate, give that a big circle right now. And whenever that behavior is not happening, you can recognize it and add a character trait to build inner wealth. Okay, we're going to jump into stand 3. And stand 3 is our clear rules and clear and simple consequences. And you're actually not going to like this, but I'm not going to talk a lot about this today. And the reason is because in NHA, you've got to get competent at stand 1 and stand 2 before the NHA stand 3 will work. It's like juggling. We got to learn to juggle the first 2 balls before we add in the third ball. Eliminating and reducing upside down connection and creating really meaningful right side up connection that's juicy is what we want kids to want to get back to. That's the time in we want them to want. And we have to be really rich in that. It becomes the place where these intense kids will get the intense connection that they need, not when they're misbehaving. In its very simplest form, NHA uses a very energetically clean timeout or a reset, shifting back to recognitions as fast as possible. And depending on what is happening, that reset can be quick in the blink of an eye. So 2 kids are arguing and I tell them to stop and they stop right away, or it can take some time. Now, saying that, I believe that one of the greatest problems we have in schools today and in some of our homes is that we don't have any stand 3. We don't have consequences. Or the consequence is paired with upside down connection. So they're not clean and they're not effective. So when we don't have clear rules or consistent consequences, it makes kids and adults feel unsafe and out of control. And I will tell you from experience that kids will test and find their own ways to control. Somebody has to be in charge in a classroom, in a school, and in a home, and it needs to be the adult. If there is no adult that will take charge, then kids will take over it. They'll take over this role. So in the Ottawa paper last year, there was a school reporting that they had students that would refuse to go into a classroom during a secure school. Like, we have chaos then because those children are now running the school. All right, I want to give you some examples of stand 3 with consequences just as we finish up here, just so you could see what a consequence might look like if beyond the reset, which is what NHA teaches. And for me, consequence, like a right side up consequence, needs to teach a lagging skill, it needs to build connection, and it needs to make kids accountable to their community, to their family, to their classmates. So in that example with the blurting kid that was blurting out, my consequence was he didn't get to blurt, and I told him I would get back to him. That was me giving him a little bit of skill building there. The kid who was like, fuck you, McGuire. As soon as he left the classroom, if we shift our mind, as soon as he left, he was already giving himself a timeout. Like I have to think to shift away from punishment to he's already started to get reset. So his consequence might have been just the right side up lecture. And a right side up lecture might have been when he's not escalated anymore and I'm no longer escalated. Hey, right now we're having this conversation. You're not swearing at me. You're not yelling. You're being respectful. I feel really safe standing beside you. You fixed your problem. I can see it. I'm reset and ready to have you back in class. Are you able to follow my rule of no swearing? Yes, no. If no, maybe I need to do some skill building, but otherwise I'm welcoming him back. He's done the reset. A child hits another child with a mini stick. They're in line in a schoolyard. I might come up behind that kid and I'm going to take their mini stick. They're hitting someone with it. I'm not giving them a lecture around that though. I'm just doing a clean consequence. I'm removing the stick. And I might say something like, you're giving your friends a chance to feel safe. Thanks for being caring. Or I might just move the kid who's been hit and I might go back to that later, but I've still got the stick. He's not like, NHA is not sunshine and lollipops all the time. We can come in with consequences and with clear rules. A kid won't come in the yard after the bell, or they won't leave the park, or they won't get to bed. I might practice with them at some other time. So before we go to the park, I might practice leaving the park. I might practice bedtime stuff when it's not bedtime. So that's a whole other piece of consequences, but I just want you to see that there can be consequences that are right side up. So the shift we make in NHA is just creating consequences that are right side up, that build connection, that build success, that skill build. The problems happens when there are no consequences, or if there is a consequences and there's no place to get back to time in, which often happens, or the consequences paired with some upside down connection time. Okay, I want to just finish off now and see if we have any questions. So for you, the last thing I want you to take away is that inner wealth, the growing of inner wealth, is what will change the behavior. That's always going to be our main focus in NHA. So just as a recap, try recognizing anything you see going right and be specific with the character trait. Change your focus at bedtimes or supervision to what are the things I see going right as opposed to all the things I see going wrong. Pick a misbehavior, any misbehavior, that one that's on your paper, and start recognizing when it's not happening. And the last one is to recognize yourself. At the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, find something you did right. And what does that say about you? Okay, I hope at the place that you're at right now that you are curious about NHA and some of its tools. And I hope you can see that behaviors can be addressed in a new way. And I hope you have hope with the people that you love and care for. Okay, Kristina, I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box our website address. So we do have once a year, and we only do this once a year, is we actually do a training. So our next Nurturing Heart Approach training starts at the end of March and runs until the end of May. And it's a combination of video lessons that you can watch at home. You get 2 video lessons a week. You get 2 video lessons on week 1, and then week 2, we join together and we practice the tools from it and work with your challenges. And then we keep doing that over the course of 12 weeks. So we have 6 in-class sessions. So combination of video and in-person. And let's go to questions.
So we've got 2 questions that popped up during the discussion today. We'll grab those first, and then we can address whatever. So Natalie asked, how do you figure out what they believe is their inner wealth? Do you want me to grab this one, Carolyn, or do you want to?
Go ahead. I've talked a lot.
So Natalie, I think that it doesn't matter that much. We're using that as an illustration here, and I would ask instead, what do you want them to believe? What do you want them to have as their inner wealth? And then find ways to prove to them that they demonstrate that. Okay, next question.
Just before you go on, I wanted to mention, because we do have some Mind Rebel Academy coaches here. So I wanted to, Deb, thanks for sharing that. Just to give you the, from that methodology, we are looking to help kids point out what their authentic self is, what their strengths are. And mostly their misbehaviors are them in their mind rebel. So really we're being like a mirror to them of all of their strengths. So we can pick any strength we want. Okay. Okay, Kristina, keep going.
Does this work for sensory issues, thumbs, fingers in mouth, and chewing stuff? You want me to do that one too?
You can, sure.
Yeah, my son has sensory processing disorder. Definitely have a lot of sensory issues. He is more avoidant of sensory than stimulating, like this child. But it's the same process for everything. And what I love about this is that in every situation, it's all about choosing what behavior you want to see and then recognizing all of the baby steps towards that behavior. And so it works for all different problems, absolutely with sensory issues as well.
So there was 2 things that came to me there. One is, what's going right with a kid who is using those things to self-soothe? Before we try to get rid of it, we want to give them things that are socially acceptable to use. But if we shift into what is going right, well, they're searching for a way to settle their nervous system. Like, how smart is that? They're using things on their body to do that with. Doesn't mean we're not going to give them other things to use, but if we can shift into like, what are they doing right, as opposed to let's just get rid of it, it will change how we bring in new tools for them to use. And yes, I have seen lots of kids be able to move to other things. Okay, before we go, in the chat box, I would love for you to share what's one takeaway you have, or one gold nugget you have from today's session. It takes a lot of practice to shift from a negative mindset to a more positive one. Absolutely. And it's actually why we switched our training. Our trainings used to be 3 hours or 6 hours, like all at once. and we switched the trainings to, like, the course is actually 12 weeks now. So in that 12 weeks, you have time to really practice the tools, get support using them, share with other people in the group, support other people in using it. So by the end of the 12 weeks, you have a much more solid understanding of the tools and how to use them and what it looks like and sounds like.